Okay, so it's about time to start. I'm trying to be very, very punctual here. First thing, can everyone hear me okay? I think yes, because I can hear myself back. Okay, well, hi everyone. Thanks for attending. So just a quick introduction. My name is Phil Bretherton. I'm product manager at Acquia. I'm working, so my responsibilities are Acquia Cloud Site Factory. And also multi-experience operations, which I'll be talking to you about in much more detail today. So just a little bit about myself to start off with. I've been working with Drupal for 13 years, so this is definitely not my first DrupalCon. I've actually done a few other ones in the US. I've been with Acquia for 10 of those years. For most of that time, I was actually a program manager working with some of our larger enterprise customers using Site Factory. And that's really given me a wealth of insights into the governance challenges that our customers are facing and how Site Factory has really been able to help them address some of those issues. So I brought these insights into the design of what is the next generation of Site Factory, which we're calling Multi-Experience Operations, MEO, and really more about that later. So the idea today, the talk title is Unlocking Enterprise Agility, a deep dive into governance and multi-experience operations. The idea is really to look at the challenges of governance in all its forms, and then see how multi-experience operations helps you to achieve governance success. So we will have, I'm sure, time for Q&A at the end of this. I do want to point out that I will be in the Acquia booth tomorrow from 9:50 to 10:05, but I can be there much longer. If you want to come and talk to me, dive into anything in a bit more detail or any questions really specific to you, please do join me there tomorrow. So I'm looking forward to sharing all my insights with you. So let's just look at what we'll be covering today. Firstly, we'll be talking about Drupal website governance. So we're at DrupalCon and really want to be talking about Drupal and why it's so crucial for success. So we'll explore some of the reasons behind implementing a really strong governance framework. Then we'll delve into the pillars of governance. So these are the core components that make up a solid governance structure. So think of them as the foundations upon which everything else is built in your governance model. Then we'll examine the different types of governance. So it's not just one governance thing. There's lots of different areas of governance. So there's brand governance, content governance, code, platform governance, and we'll be looking at all of these. We will actually spend a significant portion of today talking about Drupal code governance. So this is really where technical challenges and the opportunities lie. So we'll really spend some time looking at that in detail. We'll also discuss the dangers of the extremes in terms of governance, so the overly centralized version of governance versus the overly federated approach, and highlighting why it's good to find some kind of middle way. And finding that balance is really key to long-term success. Then we'll have a look at the importance of managing compromise, rules, practices, and these are the essential elements that make a governance framework work in the real world. And finally, we'll introduce multi-experience operations, so MEO. This is the technology that can really bring all of your governance principles to life and help you scale effectively. Okay, so that's the roadmap for our session. Let's jump right in. So I want to start by talking about Drupal website governance and what exactly it is. So a little definition. Essentially, it's the framework that orchestrates the rules, processes, and practices to shape the management, development, and maintenance of your many Drupal websites. And all of that is to meet your organizational goals. So why is this important? Well, it really helps you achieve several key things. First, it ensures a consistent user experience. All your Drupal sites offer a seamless brand experience. Secondly, you get a unified code approach, harmonizing custom modules, themes, core updates for a really simplified management. It then helps with security. It centralizes security practices for really having multi-site integrity and compliance. And then finally, it allows you to have real quality assurance processes, allows you to standardize testing and have performance benchmarks that apply across all of your sites. So that's why I think Drupal website governance is really crucial. It brings consistency, efficiency, security, and quality to your Drupal ecosystem. Okay, let's dive into some of the core components of governance. So we can think of these as the pillars of governance. So first of all, rules. So these define the boundaries and constraints within which you operate. They set the limits and expectations for everyone involved. We then have the processes. So these are standardized workflows you put in place for efficiency. These really ensure that tasks are completed in a consistent and repeatable manner. We have practices. These are established methods for execution. They're the day-to-day ways that you get things done based on your rules and processes. And then direction. Direction is really crucial. It's guiding resource allocation and strategy, making sure that everyone is moving towards the same goal. Control, that ensures adherence to policies and standards. It's how you monitor and manage compliance. And then evaluation is about measuring that progress and outcomes. It's about how you know if your governance is effective and where you need to make any adjustments. And then finally, objectives is what are your desired results and goals, and what you're aiming to achieve with this governance framework. So these are the pillars, just keep them in mind, and they all work together to create a really robust and effective governance structure for your Drupal websites. So really importantly, there's going to be a recurring theme in my talk. So governance isn't a one-size-fits-all thing. And the way I like to think about it is this sliding scale here, where on the one side we have centralized governance, so a centralized governance model where you're going to have a single team or entity, and they're making all of the decisions, they're setting all the rules, and it's a really controlled and uniform governance model. On the other side here, we have federated, and this is much, much more distributed. This is different teams or departments having lots of autonomy, making their own decisions for their own areas. And we'll keep coming back to this theme. Most organizations fall somewhere in between these two extremes, right? And the key is finding the right balance that works best for your organization's specific needs and context. You need to consider factors like the size of your organization, the complexity of your Drupal ecosystem, and the level of control that you actually want to maintain over it. So let's dive a little bit into the types of governance you need to consider. It's not just one big governance thing. It actually breaks down into several key areas. So first you have brand governance. This is about maintaining a consistent brand identity across all of your Drupal sites. Then we have content governance, which focuses on how you create, manage, and then distribute your content across sites. Code governance is critical for the technical side. It's really about how you develop, maintain, and deploy code. And finally, platform governance. This deals with the infrastructure and environment that your Drupal sites run on. And it's really, really important to remember that for each of these types, you have a different sliding scale between centralized and federated. So for each of these, the same organization may be somewhere slightly different depending on the type. So I do want to just zoom in a little bit on the different types of governance, just to bring this to life a little bit. And here we see with brand governance how that centralized versus federated scale kind of plays out. So on the centralized side, you have that single team managing the brand's image, a single design agency, a single component library maybe, and a design system that applies across all of the sites, and even perhaps a single Drupal theme. And this ensures a very, very consistent brand experience across all sites. On the federated side, you have multiple teams managing multiple brands across multiple markets. You're going to have lots of different local design agencies, a more flexible component library if you even have a single component library, and probably multiple Drupal themes. And this allows for much more localization and adaptation to different markets. So the question is, does your organization work with a single brand? Is that brand meant to be consistent across markets, or really is it multiple brands with lots of variations? And the answer, again, it depends on your organizational strategy, how much flexibility you're giving or want to give to different regions or individual business units. Okay, so let's have a look at content governance. Again, we're seeing that centralized versus federated model play out. On the centralized side, you might have really consistent marketing and communications across all brands and markets. The content creation is really centralized with content sharing mechanisms in place. You might also have centralized translation mechanisms to be able to have translations working across multiple sites in multiple languages. And then your content moderation workflows tend to be highly centralized. On the federated side, you have each site's content being really managed separately. The marketing and communication is specific to each brand and each market. And translations, if you have any, are just being managed at a single site level if those sites are multilingual, and content moderation is completely distributed. So here the question is, do you want a unified message and a brand voice, or do you actually need it to be really localized and market specific? It really depends, again, on how much control you want over messaging and how much autonomy you want to give to individual sites and regions. Okay, so code governance. So this is a really kind of critical one, and again, we'll be coming back to this. So this is where things really kind of get interesting on the technical side, on the Drupal side. So on the centralized side of things, you're going to have all of your features financed probably by a single department. So highly centralized structure, development done by a single technical agency, feature requests being submitted to a central committee, and there's going to be really strict criteria around accepting any of those feature requests. The idea being to keep features really consistent and to a minimum, so not to have too many different features. On the federated side, new features are financed basically by whoever requests them. There might be, probably will be, multiple technical agencies involved. Feature request supervision, if there is any, could be centralized, but really only to the extent where it ensures technical compatibility. And the result is that specific features will be really common, leading to more variation across sites. So the key question here is, what's important to you? Do you want really consistent features across all sites, or do you want to have sites to have more specific features tailored to their individual needs? And this is really going to impact your code governance strategy. Okay, so let's talk also about platform governance. This is about how you manage the infrastructure on your Drupal sites and other digital assets alongside them. So on the centralized side, you're going to have a single platform managed by a single platform team. This team would enforce highly centralized processes and standards. and they manage all releases to the platform. This, again, ensures consistency and control across all sites and across all of your other digital assets. On the federated side, we might have multiple platforms, multiple teams managing them. Processes and standards are likely to apply perhaps per platform, and each platform team would be managing their own releases in their own way. And this allows for much more flexibility, but leads to more inconsistency. So the question is, do you want to manage a single unified platform, or are you okay with allowing multiple platforms, more autonomy for individual teams? And this decision is really going to, again, impact your overall operational efficiency and consistency. So we've looked at the different types of governance and the centralized versus federated scale. And it's the key really here is finding the right balance for each of the areas, right? So what you're seeing here is it doesn't have to be, you might be centralized on the platform and code side, but not so much on the brand and content side. And that's, again, a reflection of your organization and what you want to achieve with your governance model. So again, the brand, you need to decide how consistent you want the brand to be across the site. For content, you need to determine how much control you want over messaging, localized, and how localized you want the content to be. For code, you need to figure out how consistent you want the features to be, how much flexibility you want to allow for site-specific needs. And on the platform side, you need to decide whether you want that single unified platform or multiple platforms with more autonomy for individual teams. So the ideal balance is really going to depend on your specific organizational needs. That's going to be the size of your Drupal ecosystem and the level of control that you need at in these different areas. So it's not really about picking one extreme or the other, but finding what works best for you. Okay, so I promised earlier we were going to focus a bit on Drupal code governance. So here we go. Why is this so important? So it's really because it's key for the successful technical execution, and it's also key for long-term maintainability. So obviously, brand, content, platform governance are really important, but code governance directly impacts the quality, security, efficiency of your Drupal sites. It's about how you manage the underlying code, and ultimately that affects everything else. So we'll be diving a little bit more deeply into challenges and best practices for managing Drupal code at scale. And we'll be looking at how to find the right balance between consistency on the one side, but flexibility also in your code, and how to ensure that your code governance supports your overall organizational goals. So we're going to talk about some of the extremes of code governance and why that actually leads to false promises. So again, we're looking really at the extremes. And on the centralized side, the thinking might be, we know what our stakeholders are looking for. It's really clear. Their needs are consistent, and we just need to provide comprehensive suite of content types and components, and that's it. We've got them covered. Sounds great in theory. The idea is to create perfect, all-encompassing set of features that's going to satisfy everyone, but in practice, it rarely works out that way. We'll come back to it. On the federated side, the thinking is trying to get all of our stakeholders to agree to anything is completely impossible. And if they want sites that are tailored to their business needs, well, let's just let them have it. And this approach seems kind of more flexible, more accommodating, but it quickly leads to chaos and fragmented code bases. So both of these extremes have their own sets of problems, and we're just going to delve into that a little bit more in the coming slides. So let's look at the problems with that overly centralized approach. So even with the best intentions, when you try to create that perfect suite of features, you can run into issues. Stakeholders are going to start saying things like, I want to control when I get new features. They're going to feel like they're being forced to accept change they didn't ask for, or that don't really align with their timelines. They might also say, and this is just an example, I can't integrate with my local CRM. The pre-built features that have been delivered with that, that global suite don't cover their local needs, and it's just not flexible enough to connect with their own existing systems. So ultimately, what this leads to is the stakeholders saying it's too restrictive. They don't feel like they have the freedom to tailor their sites to their specific needs. So, while that centralized approach seems really efficient on the surface, it often leads to stakeholder frustration and simply a lack of adoption. Okay, so let's now have a look at the other extreme, so that overly federated approach. And here, the thinking is, let them have whatever they want. And you quickly run into different problems. So what happens is, firstly, you end up with code duplication. Multiple teams are basically developing the similar features, maybe slightly different, but really they're the same thing in slightly different ways, and that just leads to redundancy and wasted effort. Then this leads to a maintenance nightmare with so many variations and different versions of code. Keeping everything up to date, compliant and secure becomes a really huge challenge. And finally, you get inconsistent user experiences. So each site looks and functions completely differently, and that can be really confusing to users and dilutes the overall brand identity. So whilst that federated approach kind of seems flexible and easy at first, it really almost always leads to a highly fragmented and unmanageable Drupal ecosystem. So where the best long-term results actually lie are somewhere in between, right? And there's a little bit of space there. You don't have to be right bang in the middle. It's somewhere in between that you're going to find the right balance for you. But that middle way is really, it's not automatic, right? It takes work. It doesn't happen on its own. And what it really takes is compromise from everyone that's involved in the process. And it requires clear rules that guide decisions and the actions that come from them. So even more importantly now, governance is at the center of it all. You need a strong governance framework to manage the compromises and enforce those rules. It's how you ensure that everyone's going to be on the same page and working towards the same goals, even with that more nuanced approach. Okay, so we're going to have a look at compromise and rules. So we've established that finding that middle ground requires compromise. What does that actually look like? So compromise involves finding middle ground where the core needs of multiple stakeholders are met without compromising individual site objectives and performance. It's not about one side winning, the other side losing. It's about finding solutions that work for everyone. So let's look at some of the common challenges that we see when finding those compromises. So we have diverse requirements, so really common. Different stakeholders will have different needs and wants. The solution here is to really establish a core set of features that satisfies the broadest set of needs possible. And that becomes the foundation that everyone can rely on across the ecosystem. The extent to which that set of core features covers absolutely every individual site need is really going to depend on where your organization sits on that governance scale. You then have conflicting priorities, so stakeholders might have different timelines or priorities for feature development. And here the solution is to implement a governance process that is able to manage and prioritize code-based changes and actually allow for some degree of flexibility. This ensures that everyone's needs are considered and that decisions are made fairly. Site customization, so some sites might really need some customizations. They really are different. And they go beyond that core feature set. And here the solution is, to some extent, and you all know this, leveraging Drupal modules, installation profiles and recipes to allow that extensibility without compromising the code base itself. And this gives site flexibility, the flexibility that the stakeholders actually need while maintaining the integrity of the core. And then finally, the release strategy. So different sites might have different requirements for when new features are released. And the solution here is to establish release strategies that respect stakeholder constraints. So this might be periods where they really, really want to avoid any kind of instability or release, really accepting that and making it possible to roll out releases different times to different sites. And this can involve having staggered releases or even allowing some sites to opt in or opt out of updates. So ultimately, managing compromise is about listening to stakeholders, understanding their needs, and really finding creative solutions that are going to work for everyone. Okay, so we've talked about compromise, and there's also rules. So rules are absolutely essential. They create that shared language and framework for all stakeholders, and they really help minimize risk by providing clear guidelines and expectations for everyone. They allow managed and orderly evolution of the Drupal code base. Basically, without them, things can get really, really messy and descend into chaos. So let's look at some of the common challenges and how rules can help address them. So code-based management. So without rules, code becomes fragmented and disorganized. And here the solution is to enforce rules for code centralization and versioning. And that's going to ensure that everyone's working within the same code base and that changes are really being tracked and managed effectively. Feature overlap and variance. So again, without rules, you end up with multiple teams building essentially the same features in slightly different ways. And we've looked at why that's a bad thing, right? So the solution here is to create rules that mandate the use of existing features before developing new ones. Also, allowing controlled feature variance is really important. And actually having a definitive forking strategy when necessary, if a group of sites or a site really is going somewhere very different, allowing that to happen, but allowing that to happen in a controlled way is essential. And all of this really prevents duplication and ensures consistency where it matters and where it needs to apply. On the security and compliance side, so we know security is paramount. And the solution here is to define security protocols, update rules to protect all sites proactively. And this is going to make sure that all sites meet those security standards and that vulnerabilities are addressed promptly. And then finally, performance. So critical for user experience. And the solution here is to ensure that every aspect of the solution scales to whatever demand is made of it. This could involve rules around code optimization, caching, infrastructure. So essentially, rules provide the guardrails that keep your Drupal ecosystem running smoothly and effectively. Okay, so we've talked about compromise, defining rules, and finally, let's talk about establishing practices. So practices are those day-to-day ways that you put your rules and compromises into action. They're activities, routines, processes that ensure that your Drupal code base is being managed effectively. Practices are how you make sure that stakeholders are getting what they need, while also adhering to rules that you've set. So ultimately, success is guaranteed when your tools support the rules and practices that you've established. It's not enough just to have the rules on paper. You have to have the right tools and the right workflows to make those rules a reality. And this is where multi-experience operations, or MEO as I'm going to refer to it, comes in. So this is where we start to see how Acquia can support and enhance your governance efforts. So first and foremost, MEO is a governance-first platform. So it introduces a rich set of adaptive governance features directly onto the Acquia Cloud platform. This means that governance hasn't been an afterthought. It's been built into the very foundation of the operations. Next, MEO provides a powerful release management capability. Specifically, it allows for controlled deployments. This means that you can have timely and targeted feature rollouts. You can deploy updates to specific sites or groups of sites as needed without having to impact everything at once. For business critical assets, MEO offers site isolation. So you can create protected environments that isolate and shield key sites, ensuring their security and their stability. And this is crucial for your most important digital properties. And then finally, MEO offers unmatched scalability and dependability. It's based on our Acquia Cloud Next infrastructure, built on Kubernetes Core, and this allows for effortless scaling to meet traffic demands. And it basically ensures that you're always going to be online with dependable performance and constant uptime. And this is obviously really critical in maintaining consistent and reliable user experience across all of those various sites. So MEO isn't just a platform. It's a strategic tool that helps you to put governance principles into practice and really ensures the long-term success of your Drupal ecosystem. So it's one thing to talk about those rules and processes we talked about earlier, but it's another to actually implement them effectively, and that's where MEO really shines. So MEO provides the practical means to actually define and enforce rules and processes. It's not just theoretical concepts, it's a set of tools and capabilities that make governance tangible. One of the key features is dashboards that provide a centralized view of digital assets across the platform. This gives us the visibility into everything that's happening, and it makes it much easier to monitor and manage your Drupal ecosystem. Then we have centralized feature management, independent release capabilities. Those are really crucial for controlling feature variants where necessary. You can manage features at a high level and still deploy them to individual sites or groups of sites as needed. And that's really the way of finding the right balance between consistency and flexibility that we've been talking about. And then finally, MEO's centralized management capabilities allow for that proactive security and compliance. You can push out updates and patches across the board, ensuring that all your sites are going to be secure and compliant. And this is much more efficient and effective than trying to manage security on a site-by-site basis. So again, MEO is not just a platform, it's a governance enabler. It gives you the tools that you need to put your rules and processes into practice and ensure the smooth operation of your Drupal ecosystem. So we're back to that sliding scale. So multi-experience operations really has you covered wherever your organization lands on that scale, in particular with regards to code governance. And we're going to have a little look at how MEO actually adapts to those different organizational needs and governance models. So let's take it from the left and give you some examples. So if all your sites are alike and you want a really high level of control, that MEO standard provides that single group of sites that you're able to manage as a single unit, both in terms of all the runtime settings, but also when releasing code to it. And then moving along slightly towards a less centralized model, if most of your sites are alike, But something like, and this is really common, something like your .com site is kind of really sensitive. You really want to have a different cycle for that site in particular. Then you can use the standard features of MEO, but you can also add to it site isolation for that specific site. So that gives you, on the one hand, a group of sites on one production environment, all being managed together, and then isolating out that other really sensitive site onto its own dedicated production environment. Moving along again, if you have many sites, and in my example, 50 sites, but it could be hundreds, sometimes it's even thousands, and you have different priorities or regional needs, MEO standards is then added to MEO isolation plus MEO regionalization. And this allows for dedicated groups of sites with multiple production environments, enabling control over deployment and timing. So really being able to decide, how do I group my sites, which ones move together, and being able to manage that degree of flexibility in the governance model. And then moving along again, I might still, in my example, still have 50 sites, but I then have 10 that have really, really custom needs. So again, we kind of, MEO standards covers those 40 sites that are really similar. But here Code Studio, so Acquia Code Studio comes into play. And this provides for having that main code base for those 40 uniform sites, plus multiple, so it could be one if those 10 others are really similar to each other, or more if they're actually all really quite different from each other. And you have multiple code bases for those custom sites, and you are going to have common code. So the idea isn't to have a complete fork of everything. You still have common code, and that can be managed basically through very simple dependencies, and that's something that Acquia Code Studio can manage with actually very minimal effort. So then we end up on the extreme side, and you know, this is where you know, really all of your sites are completely different. There's kind of no scope for actually consolidating them in any way. And in this case, well, even then you're probably going to have some things that your organization is imposing on you. And my example here is certain security standards, and you might have some modules that actually allow you to adhere to those standards really easily. And so, again, here you have a whole variety of different sites on different code bases being managed separately, but having Code Studio there to be able to manage the dependencies where you have common code. So essentially what I'm saying is MEO is really able to adapt from that single highly controlled environment all the way across this sliding scale to that diverse, those diverse sites that are all so different. So it really gives you the flexibility and governance that you need. So focusing a little bit on code-based management and giving you an idea of how MEO actually manages it. So MEO's code-based management system allows you to monitor where code gets added, which version is deployed to which group of sites. And this is going to be really crucial for maintaining control and visibility across a complex Drupal ecosystem. Also with MEO, you can easily track changes, understand the impact of updates, and ensure that the right code is deployed to the right environment. And this level of control is essential to managing large number of sites and maintaining that consistency and security across the board. MEO also allows you to find that sweet spot between consistency and flexibility. By default, development happens in a single code base, and the same features are available to all sites. And that puts strong control on variants, ensuring consistency across your ecosystem. However, MEO recognizes that sometimes variance is necessary. If and when a subset of sites needs to have unique features, you just spin up a new code base, and then you're able to put those sites on that code base and have the flexibility to be able to manage specific requirements without losing overall control and visibility over your code bases. So again, with MEO, you're getting the best of both worlds, consistency by default and flexibility when needed. MEO provides a really advanced capability around grouping of sites and managing them as units. And this is really crucial for controlling releases and ensuring that updates are rolled out in a way that makes sense to your organization. So releases can be targeted at different groups of sites at different times. You have that flexibility to deploy releases in parallel, sequentially, or even in a staggered way. And this allows you to manage risk and ensure that updates aren't disrupting all of your sites at once. And also, MEO allows for long-term variance in version. So perhaps certain features need to be rolled out to some groups of sites in advance, while others need to stay on a more stable release for a longer period of time. And here, really, MEO can accommodate that. And this level of flexibility, again, is essential for managing a complex ecosystem of sites with varying needs and priorities. So let's come back to the establishment of practices. And remember, those practices are day-to-day activities, routines, processes that bring the rules to life. They're how you make your Drupal code base, make sure your Drupal code base is managed effectively and that those stakeholders are getting what they need. So with MEO supporting the rules and practices that you've established, my contention is success is really guaranteed. So why do I say that? Because MEO provides the tools, the infrastructure that make those practices work. It provides the mechanism that makes enforcing your rules possible and helps you establish those practices across your Drupal ecosystem. It provides that visibility into what's happening across your sites, so you can really ensure compliance and address any issues really quickly. With MEO, we're not just hoping that your best practices are going to be followed. You have the technology to ensure it. You have the tools to monitor, manage, and enforce your rules, and that's what really is going to ensure your success in the long run. MEO takes the burden of manual management off your shoulders. It allows your teams to focus on what they do best, and that's building great Drupal experiences. It's a combination of clear rules, effective practices, and the right technology that leads to well-governed, high-performing, and sustainable Drupal ecosystems. So thank you very much. I think we have time for Q&A for sure. And again, quick reminder, if you want to talk to me about anything in a bit more detail, I'm available tomorrow during this time slot, but also I'll be around the booth and you can talk to me about this. So yeah, any questions right away? Please go ahead. Okay, so I'm just for the recording, I'm going to repeat the question. So the first one was about, I think it was about when is it the right time to think about governance, and the second question was how do you actually talk to people about governance when they're so busy doing, doing the Drupal code and so on. So as with MEO, where we talk about MEO being governance first, I think a project should almost be governance first. You should think about it right from the very beginning, and the way you're going to develop your Drupal website or Drupal websites, because that's more the kind of theme here, is going to be influenced by the governance structures that kind of already exists and the organizational norms that already exist. And having governance as an afterthought is generally a recipe for disaster, because it's then that you realize we've developed this thing, but we don't know how to govern it because it doesn't reflect the way our organization works. We don't have, we just can't have the processes in place because, because we've, for example, I'm going to take the extreme example, we've done something really centralized, but the company is really federated and lots of autonomous business units. So hopefully you've kind of addressed that at the beginning, and governance is a theme and is part of all of your steering committees, and it's something that you're talking about all the time to all of the stakeholders. And so that's going to make it easier to talk to people afterwards about it, and not just kind of introduce it as a theme halfway through the project, say, hey, let's think about governance now, and that's going to be not only too late, but it's going to suddenly give people lots of work that they don't have time for. I hope that answers your questions. Yeah, please.
So this is compatible with Site Factory sites. So if you have multiple stacks,
Yeah.
will that be replaced with groups of sites?
Yeah. So the question is whether this is compatible with Site Factory, and whether, if today you have on Site Factory multiple stacks, that will, I guess, translate into MEO. So the answer, just to, the idea is that MEO will take over from Site Factory. So we will definitely have that mapping between something, what you have today on Site Factory. So in general terms, a stack is going to map onto a code base. So because that's on Site Factory, what a stack essentially is it provides another code repository, and you can use that to really develop something completely different, but within the same factory. There are use cases, right, for stacks that don't correspond to what I've just said. So sometimes a stack is actually there to get more capacity or something like that, and in reality it's being run off the same code. So in those cases, we might actually look and say, well, actually, these 5 stacks, they're using the same code. So really, logically, in MEO, they're the same code base. We might not have those same limitations that meant that you decided to have 5 stacks. And so in MEO, it would just be one code base. You might think about potentially, because you want to, I don't know, stagger releases, you might have multiple production environments and be able to have a bit more flexibility, but you probably wouldn't have multiple code bases in that case. So it's a question, it's something that we will, as we're talking to customers about MEO and the future for their Site Factories, we'll have to assess that and look at how should things map in the best possible way onto MEO. It's not easy, yeah.
So with this, would there be a path for that?
Yeah, so, and just, so in the case where the stack is being used almost to kind of stagger deployments and so on, and it's actually all running off the same code base, again, that's more likely to map to multiple production environments. And MEO will allow for a very high degree of flexibility around that. So if you want to move a site from one production environment to another one, you want to isolate it because you have a particular need at a particular time on that site, that's something that you'll be able to do, which again, very difficult to do on Site Factory today. Okay. We have time for another one, yeah? There is definitely a roadmap, and I can bring that tomorrow if you want me to walk you through that. Absolutely. So, yeah. So big picture is just really high level. We've done some of the foundational work, and we have a really major milestone in July of this year where we get kind of the majority of what I've been talking to you about today, the kind of the ability to have multiple production environments and so on, onto the cloud platform. So that's going to be, that's going to cover probably 80%, first of all, of Site Factory customers and their needs, but also new customers coming along who have that multi-site use case. And by the end of this year, probably kind of bleeding a little bit into next year, the intention is to have full, to have all the capabilities that Site Factory has today. Now, I want to we're not redeveloping feature by feature Site Factory, that's not the intention, but have the capability equivalents by the end of the year, maybe first quarter of next year. But I do want to say, it's an ongoing process. We won't stop at that equivalence. We're going to go beyond that and really innovate around the whole, topic of managing many, many sites at scale and the governance that goes with that. Okay. Yeah, go for it.
I guess also upgrading roles management.
Upgrading what, sorry?
Roles.
Yes, it will, yeah. So the question, was there a question or whether it's just part of what we'll be doing? Yeah. So the question was whether updating roles management will be part of the scope of MEO, and the answer is 100% yes. We're reviewing that and trying to make it much more granular, using roles-based access control, and as we do the work on the cloud platform, we're introducing lots of new entities, thinking about how they need to be controlled, what the actions people can do on them, what the roles that make sense for those permissions. So yes, and it will be, there will be the ability also to create custom roles and associate permissions to those roles and so on. So again, it will go way beyond what you have today on Site Factory. Okay, I think we're at time, but I'm happy to field another question or two if you have any. Okay, thank you very much.